Hi there, my name is Steve Tier and I'm an illustrator and teacher here in Philadelphia, and today I'm going to do some drawing, and I'm also going to first show you some comics and some books and some things I have for sale. These are things I usually bring to festivals and to craft fairs and to things like that. This is my second time at the Cartoon Crossroads. I was at the very first one a few years ago. It was a lot of fun. I was able to go on a road trip with a few cartoonists from Philadelphia, and we stayed near the festival in I think it was an Airbnb, and had a really good time. And but back then I was doing primarily fiction comics, and in the years since I've been mostly doing nonfiction comics. I've been doing journalism type comics, things for the Nib.com, and also for some local newspapers and websites here in Philadelphia. So I have things like that printed, but I also have some fiction work printed. And I'm currently working on a fiction comic, the first one I've done in a few years. That should be done probably by the end of the year, maybe early next year. And when I am at festivals, I usually do sketches for people, and those are usually quick little cartoony sketches of pets. Because my other side gig is I do pet portraits. That started off as a thing I was doing as just kind of like gifts for people. But the last couple of years, it's been getting more popular for me, and so I usually do maybe about a pet portrait a week or so. So I'm kind of always taking commissions, and as a way of selling some drawings at festivals, that's something I normally do. So I'll talk about the pet portraits again soon, but first I want to just show you some of the things I have um, that's printed. So sometimes I print these little sketchbooks. These are collected sketches from 2017. This has some drawings from when I went to Germany that year. This is artwork from I think a German museum I was sketching from. It's another German museum. And just kind of like some doodles. I think some of these were made on the plane to Germany. So I usually have some kind of sketch collection. Similar to that would be the Inktober zine I made last year, and it looks like I only have one of these left. I can sell this for, I guess, just a couple of bucks and maybe another $2 for shipping. This is called Deco Sketches. I went to Detroit last year with my wife, and I was born near Detroit, but I've never really spent a lot of time there. My family hasn't lived in Michigan for many years, but I was blown away by all the Art Deco architecture. So I started just kind of like drawing sketches from Detroit, and also just kind of drawings from places nearby. Oh, it looks like I have one more of these. Yeah, drawings from Chicago and from Miami. This is actually an Art Deco building from India. And I started just Googling and looking at Art Deco fashion designers. And I started really getting interested in Deco artwork, and I still think I'm really obsessed with the design and the style. I always kind of liked it, but seeing so much of it in Detroit was really was eye-opening for me. It was a lot of fun. Other things I sell one-page books. These are just usually for $1. I think if you buy something from me, I'll probably just toss this in if I have enough. And these are just kind of doodles of weird faces using pencil and ink and wash. And you can open it up into, I can do this, a bigger face. I teach elementary art, and this is something we often do, and the kids have a lot of fun making their own small books. I have only three copies left of my last fiction comic that I printed, the last full story. And this is something that I believe I debuted at the first Cartoon Crossroads. So this is called The Spider Grandmother. And it's just a story of a journalist going to a kind of like Burning Man type festival. And, just kind of being an out of place person at that festival and drawing and writing about the things that he sees there. And this is also a risograph book. This is the first thing I printed that was in the risograph style. It was a lot of fun because before I made this, I made a very just kind of traditional ink comic with a lot of hatching and stuff like that, and it was fun to kind of move to a different medium and a different printing style after that. So that's The Spider Grandmother. And speaking of risograph, I have prints of a project that I never really took off or I haven't really done anything with, and this is called Fake Cult Leaders. I've done some comics and some researches about real cults, but I just like the idea of coming up with a name for a cult leader that doesn't exist, and also drawing them, just kind of imagining what their cult or their small religion might be. This one's called Martin Young of the Inner Scream, and I think this one's my favorite, John Timbrell of the One Truth. So these, I forgot to mention the price of the Spider Grandmother, but I'll post that on Discord. That's $5, so plus another couple bucks for shipping. These would be $8 a piece. These are all little risograph cards, $8 a piece for those. And the rest of my zines I have for sale are all $5. And if you'd like to get a couple different zines, I'll definitely work out some kind of discount and throw some extra drawings and things in there for you. This is kind of a silly zine I've worked on throughout the years. This is called The Inner Monologues of Suited Stiffs. It's mostly one panel or two panel cartoons. And it's just kind of imagining like what kind of like 80s corporate workers are thinking in their heads, and some of it is funny, and some of it is maybe a little depressing or kind of ominous and strange. I really like drawing kind of big shoulder pads and kind of an 80s sort of aesthetic with people working in middle management and things like that. And now we move on to, this is kind of an odd collection of sketches and doodles, and also a few comics that were projects that I started, never really took off into anything. This is pulled from my sketchbook. It was a dream I had, so it's sort of mysterious and hard to describe. I did a series of comics about driving. So here is a quick comic about, it's the first time I heard about Uber, and was kind of thinking about the dangers or the mysterious nature of Uber. And so here's some more comics about driving, and these are I guess these are fiction comics. These are just kind of imagined conversations or situations around driving. There's a lot of littering in Philadelphia, so I've made a comic relating to people littering out of their cars. Some more doodles in this zine. This zine is called Forgotten Images Emerge. This is a thing I originally did for the Nib. This is called High School Mythology. High School Mythology. And this is a comic about public schools and private schools, and the first thing I did for the Nib was a comic about charter schools. and it's just this comic sort of follows up that and just talks about like what our country kind of thinks about its schools, or what people think about when they think back to schools. And it's also a little bit of a historical account of uh, why our schools are so kind of segregated and structured in all kinds of different ways. I'm working on another comic currently for another magazine about virtual schools, and it talks a little bit about this current moment of distance learning, virtual schooling, and things like that. So I very much like teaching, but I'm also really interested in the history and kind of the different psychologies and philosophies behind teaching. I also got to draw another '80s type corporate type for this scene, so that was lucky for me. And here's a nice kind of religious sports image for the back of High School Mythology, and that's also $5. And lastly, this is probably the comic I'm most proud of. It's called Chinny and the Tiger. And these are accounts from a friend of mine that I used to work with. His name is Chinny Key, and he's retired now. He worked in the Philadelphia School District for many years, and he was also an interpreter for the Cambodian community in Philadelphia. And he's a Cambodian himself, Cambodian refugee. So during the terrible Khmer Rouge crisis in Cambodia, he and his family were, just going through all the troubles that were going on during the mid 70s to early 80s there. And it was a genocide in Cambodia, and this kind of talks about just sort of like one week that he remembers in his time there, and also gives you a quick sort of snapshot of the history of Khmer Rouge. And it's a very violent and miserable story, but it's a very harrowing, and it's an incredible adventure that he was on to escape the Khmer Rouge. And most of the story talks about this friend that he made, this younger friend of his, in the work camps that they were in. And so I met with Chinny a bunch of times to interview him about this, and it was just a really breathtaking story to hear about. And I'm really grateful that he allowed me to kind of format it into a comic. So that's Chinny and the Tiger. And now I'm going to get set up, and the next thing I'm going to do is make some sketches about pet portrait sketches. But first, let me get a drink of water. I love doing portraits of pets for people. It's a lot of fun, and I do sort of kind of cartoony or maybe children's book type illustrations of people's dogs and cats or other pets. So here's an example of one that I finished today. So usually people request that they be dressed up in a certain way and that they're in a certain background. And these are gouache paintings on heavyweight paper with ink and brush ink and nib ink on top. Here's another one I finished. This is actually the first time I've drawn a turtle, so this is kind of special. This is a scientist turtle, and turtle's hanging out with his other scientist cat friends. I think I have another. This is an early one that I did. Usually kind of go for like a vintage feel for these if people don't already have an idea that they'd like. And I've done a few kind of just, more conventional portraits of pets where they're not anthropomorphized or anything like that. But I prefer to dress them up and to kind of put them in a background and put them into a story.